Good afternoon. It is April 23rd. It's 2 o'clock. This is PLC II. Thank you guys for being here today. I appreciate that very much. Let me get into sharing my screen here real quick, and I will show you the agenda for the day. There's a couple things I want to do. In particular, I know that, well, I don't know this, but I suspect that by now in your curriculum and instruction class, you've gotten probably to that lesson plan assignment. And if you're not there yet, you're going to be there pretty soon. So I want to show you a way to walk through the lesson planning that you're going to do and using the cube. Hopefully by doing that, we'll kind of combine the purposes for these two classes together, which if this was a perfect world, this is what we would be doing anyway. If we were still meeting face-to-face, we'd be able to do this in kind of real time. So I'm going to try to do that today and just show you a potential way you could use the cube to design some lesson planning. We are still going to do some small group instructions today, but we're not going to do a hot topic. I'm cutting those out. It hasn't worked. So that we're going to be done with the hot topics for the rest of the semester. But we're going to talk emotional and intellectual safety and choice, which hopefully is what you saw in some videos that you watched this week. We're also going to try to, what's the word I'm looking for? We're also going to try and get into your brain this idea of novelty, variety, and authenticity, which is what you're going to observe for next week. So I'm going to ask you to talk about some things that you have seen in your own educational experiences in your small groups to kind of wet your whistle for that before you go out and check videos for that. Oh, and then this is actually left over from last week. We're not doing that. We're not going to look at Rita Pearson anymore. So we'll come back then and process what was said in the small groups. We'll talk a little bit about what's going to happen next week, which is our last class, because we're not going to meet during the finals week. The next week will be our last class. And then after that, we'll head out. So those are the things that we're going to try and get done today. And if I see your friend Jenna. He looks like my son, actually. He's a fine-looking young man. So if things pop up and you have to head out, so be it. But I'm recording the session, and hopefully we'll be able to post that on the internet a little bit later today. So I'm going to share my screen with you again, and we'll go back to the agenda. But I really want to show you the cube. And this is going to be kind of clumsy because I'm going to show you a lesson plan, and the lesson plan is on a Word document. But the cube is obviously in our course website. So I'm going to have to kind of do a stop share and start sharing. So I'm going to share stuff back and forth, and I apologize for that, but that's the way we're going to do. So this again is the cube. You've been looking for a lot of these things on the front part of the cube, eight engaging qualities of work by Schlechty. You've been looking for those in your observations over the last few weeks. Don't forget also, we've got this idea of high yield instructional strategies from Marzano, and this big idea thinking from Bloom's taxonomy. And our contention is pretty much that as you design your lesson plans, if you choose activities from one or more sides of this cube and build those into your lesson plans, that you're going to be successful in your lesson planning. So let me kind of show you where I'm going with that. And I just kind of thought about this about 10 or 15 minutes before class. So kind of bear with me as I kind of move back and forth. This is the modified Hunter instructional plan. And just for kicks, give me a general thumbs up if you've seen this. This is stuff that I think that you've probably seen in the framework of what you've done. Okay. Hang on. So you'll notice, there's the anticipatory set. And once you get into your anticipatory set, after you've gotten your objective and you've gotten your I can't statements, you're going to try to figure out how it is that you're going to bring your students into class. Well, hopefully you can remember to use the cube. And so for instance, here I was a social studies teacher. So here's how I'm going to get my students into a lesson that I'm going to start to differentiate between the 1920s, which were known as the Roaring 20s because they were such a forward thinking and a real boom time in the United States history. I'm going to have them kind of transition between the boom times of the 1920s and the bust times of the 1930s. So I'm going to read two selections. One is going to be about the 1920s. One is going to be about the 1930s. And I'm going to have them turn to their shoulder partners and discuss differences between the 1920s and 1930s that they heard in their selections. So that's what I have come up with. And I used the cube to kind of figure that out. And I'll show you, if I can transition back between there. I looked at a high yield instructional strategy on the top of the cube, and that was identifying similarities and differences. And so one thing I really wanted them to do is look at the differences between the 1920s and the 1930s. So I took that off the top of the cube. And I also said I wanted them to kind of learn with others. So I want them to hear the selections that I'm reading, but I also want them to identify similarities and differences, but I want them to do that with a partner. And so the engagement area in that is learning with others from Schlechty's work. And if they're doing similarities and differences, then I think automatically in this big idea thinking, they're probably either doing analysis or synthesis of ideas. So in that anticipatory set, I've used one thing from each of the sides of the cube. And that's how I designed that particular anticipatory set. So moving to the, from the anticipatory set to the procedures during the lesson, you do the I do, we do, you do, and I don't know how you broke that down in your curriculum and instruction classes, but the you do is sometimes called independent practice. And so what I'm going to have my students do for independent practice is there are going to be 4 popsicle sticks that they're going to pull out of a jar or a can or something. And each one of those popsicle sticks has a statement on it. One of the statements will be good things about the 1920s. One of the statements will be bad things about the 1920s. Good things about the 1930s or bad things about the 1930s. They're going to be groups of 4. Each person is going to draw a stick. You can trade a stick if you want to. And they're going to have 5 minutes to go back through what they read, what they heard me talk about, summarize stuff with partners, bounce it off of the teacher partners, and then they're going to take their things, and each person that has that particular popsicle stick is going to present it to another group, and then vice versa. Okay? So again, I use the cube in order to see if I can make that happen. The engaging qualities of work, there's going to be a sense of audience there. I wanted to have a sense of audience because we talked last week that giving students a sense of audience actually kind of makes it a bigger deal and makes them more engaged in their work. There's also the idea of learning with others, kind of novelty and variety. You don't pull popsicle sticks like that very often. And there's an element of choice in there that if they can get somebody to trade with them, if they don't like their particular decade or their bad or good portion of it, they can possibly trade with somebody. They're going to have to synthesize what they heard and what they've read, maybe do some analysis with that. There's summary in there, so there's summarizing and note-taking. There's potentially non-linguistic representation. You can maybe argue there was advanced cues and organizers in there too. So again, I've used at least one thing from each side of the cube when I've designed my lesson. And then the last thing here on my modified Hunter plan is after the lesson, what kind of an assessment strategy am I going to use? And so kind of the closing thing of class, or maybe it's homework, or maybe it's what they do as they first come in the next day. The situation, you and a partner are time travelers given a choice by your time travel agency to travel back to either the 1920s or the 1930s. Which decade do you choose, and why do you choose that? So again, if we go back to the cube, I've really tried to pull things off of each of these sides. Again, we've got learning with others, choice, because they can choose which decade they want to go back to and why. There might be some novelty and variety with that. The idea of personal response, because it's their own choice. They're the ones that get to make that decision, but they have to summarize or the information that they've used to make that happen. This is also kind of generating and testing a hypothesis, because they're going to use information to do an event that's really not going to take place. It's an evaluation thing as well, because they have to choose which of those decades they want to go to and why they want to do that. So that's using the cube to design lessons in the framework of a lesson plan. Okay, and I did that with the Hunter plan because I'm Team Hunter in that way. That's my favorite plan to use. You're welcome to use whichever lesson plan that you want, I think, depending on what your instructors have said to you. But that's how I would use the cube in order to formulate my lesson planning. Okay, any questions about that? Okay, hopefully that kind of blends some of these things that we're doing in each of these classes together. In a perfect world, if we were face-to-face, it would be easier to have done those things, but we are existing in the reality that we're in. So hopefully that kind of brings those things home with you. So one more time, I'm going to share a screen with you. And let me move away from the cube, go back to the modules here. Oops. Okay, I'm going to try to open up Schlechty's 8 qualities of engagement. Can you see this? If I don't download it, can you see the page as I'm moving it through? Okay, so going back to our agenda here. In your small groups, I'm going to put you into here in just a second. You're going to talk about what you saw as far as learning with others and sense of audience, either your personal experience in your educational career or what you saw in videos. But we're also going to talk about next week's information. Hang on, that's not the agenda for this week. Sorry. There we go. We're going to get into this idea of novelty and variety, and then authenticity. And I also want you to kind of talk about this in your group as far as potential personal experiences that you've had in your educational career with these things. So let me just kind of get into that document here. Novelty, variety, and authenticity. Okay. Okay. Novelty and variety, learning experiences that are unusual or unexpected. Can you deviate from the routine? And routine is really important in a classroom until it's not. Sometimes as a teacher, you get a sense that, you know, it's time to shake things up a little bit. And so you go outside of the framework of normal, and that helps to engage your students more than maybe some other things. So what does it look like? A variety of products that they could create. Diverse perspectives, integrated fun. A Kahoot is a good thing to integrate every now and again into a classroom setting because it's novel, it adds variety. The games, simulations and role play, competitions, writing things in the voice of somebody else, you know, those sorts of things. It's not a free day, although I should probably pause the video recording when I'm saying this, but every now and again in the framework of a class, maybe a free day is not a bad thing. But this is not it. Schlechty's engaging qualities would not say that it's free day. So don't think about it in those terms. Think about it in terms of just varying up your usual instructional methods. What have you seen with that? What have you experienced with that? How has that worked for you in your educational career? And the other thing that I would like you to talk about a little bit, just to kind of get your mind around the topic, is authenticity. What does that actually mean? Well, nobody's got a 100% ironclad definition of what it means, but if students feel like tasks are meaningless or contrived, or if they don't have any consequence, they're much less likely to take them seriously. So how relevant are the activities that you put out in your classroom? Can they be put into some sort of a real life situation? Does it involve inquiry? Does it involve synthesis? Does it involve home technology or technology in the school setting? How is it that it can build their own skill set to be successful outside of school? That might be a good idea or a good way to think about how authentic a particular topic is that you choose to teach about. Okay, so one more time here. In our groups here in just a few moments, and I'll give you probably somewhere between 8 and 10 minutes in the groups. What did you see in terms of emotional and intellectual safety and choice? If you didn't watch the videos or if you didn't see anything in your video, what are some personal examples in your educational career that you can think of, emotional and intellectual safety and choice? And then the second thing or the third thing to talk about in your own educational career, how have you experienced novelty and variety or authenticity? Or you might think about this in terms of your future in a classroom. How do you see yourself setting these things up in a classroom? Okay, what ideas might you have for that? Okay, so those are the things we're going to talk about in the smaller groups. I'm going to do the breakout rooms now. Let me stop the recording. So as we come back out of our groups, any questions in your within the groups about what any of those terms actually meant. Again, we're dealing with, in this past week, we looked at emotional and intellectual safety and choice. And then this week coming up, we're going to be looking for novelty and variety and also authenticity. Was there any, not really disagreements, but were there questions in your groups about what any of those things actually meant? Okay. What else do I want to say about that? I don't know. As far as novelty and variety, I'm guessing that maybe like the first week or two of Zoom classes, maybe that was novel. But at this point, if you're like me, you just want to get back and do the face-to-face stuff once again. So that'll be novel in and of itself when we see each other face-to-face once again. So this week, for those observations, you can use those 3 videos or one of those 3 videos that we've given to you already. You're free to find a video of your own if you want to do it this time, or do it a little bit differently this time. I think I allowed you to do that last week too. It doesn't have to be anything that's really long, and you know, if you can do a 7 to 10 minute and see the things in there, that's wonderful. Trying to think of anything else that you would need. I don't think so. I think that's about it. If you have any questions about this or other things, you're welcome to hang out after dismissal, and I'll answer questions. Other than that, I would say thanks for being here. Have a great week. Be as safe as you can. The semester's almost done, and then hopefully, like I said, after the summer's done, we'll get to come back and see each other in the fall. So take care, guys, and we'll see you later. Bye-bye.